One sector down, one more to go this coming week. Over the weekend, we had a PQ. Next week, we're preparing for sectors. A lot to talk about tonight, a lot of data to go through. The meta is shifting. The top deck has changed efficiently. HOD to ECL is here to stay, and a lot to break down because of it. I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina Crew, and tonight I'm joined by Kyle and Sharkey, fresh off our PQ down in Pueblo, going to Mesa this weekend. Me and Sharkey are. Kyle is going to Milwaukee, like a month from now. It's a month from now, give or take, right? So a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of SWU to play, and I think we could really say for the first time since the holiday season, since before the holiday season, things are actually heating up, right? Things are actually changing, and there's a lot of movement in the meta, which I think we're all excited about.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see a new data or a new deck on top that might take the target off of Yoda's back finally.
Well, we're getting that cyclical effect, right? I mean, the new deck on top on ECL is a response to the previous leader. I'll also say about Mesa, is there room in that Airbnb?
I was going to say, what's the over-under on Kyle showing up?
So you're going to leave my dog with your lovely family and come down. That sounds great. There's a nice shed with your name on it in the hot Mesa desert. I don't know. I'll have to talk to the host. But overall, right, it is exciting. There's a lot of change in the air. I'm sure Sharkey is excited for CAD and the rise of Tarkin Town kind of being a little bit of a thing. So if you're new here, what we kind of do on this pod is that we go through the data, we go through all the matchups, we pull up some deck lists that we find interesting, and it's a kind of little bit of a treat this week because we're like fresh coming off of the three of us competing in a PQ together last weekend, and then like I mentioned, we're competing again this weekend. So we're kind of in this middle period of deck prep, reflection, ideation, trying to strategize and all this stuff. So tonight you're gonna help us do that and go through it, right? So I would be remiss to not kick things off with just, shout out Swoop Racers, man. We see Hantu ECL take down the sector in the Netherlands. That's the
Congrats
first
to
thing.
SIP.
Yeah, of course. I mean, huge run for them overall. Obviously, two true partners in the sense of the word in terms of deck builders. Obviously, they're part of Team Enigma overall, but together they make up the Swoop Racers, and we have a sector champion and a world champion, a galactic champion, if you will. I feel kind of weird saying that, but Hantu ECL has always kind of been their thing, going back towards Shadows, and it showed as we see the bracket here with SIP taking down Magnetar in the finals, that Yoda Data Vault. And this is a matchup that, as someone who's been playing Yoda Data Vault a lot, I hate seeing. So it's a tough spot for a Yoda player to be in, but we see a lot of great matchups throughout this tournament. We'll talk about it. But Sharky, I know you've had the chance to hang out with SIP quite a bit in over at Gen Con. What were your thoughts about the event overall from the data perspective?
The data is interesting, and at least if you look at the top 8, that's kind of an interesting polarization here. You have either the relatively fast aggro decks in the Hantu ECL / Sabine ECL, and then you have the 2-3 odd Data Vault decks that are effectively go big or go home, right? So there's not a whole lot of what I would consider to be mid-range here, and I do find that to be at least a little bit interesting off the cuff.
Kyle?
Yeah, the one that sticks out to me is the outlier, looking at the Palp 1 blue. We've been in this arms race now for a while, and it's how are we going to attack Yoda Data Vault, which was the previous kind of head honcho, and the answer was go wide aggro with Han ECL, which seems to be the preferred method for most, or try to go even bigger, right? And how do you go even bigger? I guess it's with Palp Blue. You get a leader with an even more impactful flip and more big giant things with board wipes to try to come back. We'll get into our PQ in a little bit, but that certainly was a strategy locally here.
Yeah, and I guess one note is that I bet everybody in this top 8 secretly conspired and was very happy about the 2 blue-green villain decks playing each other in the first round of the top 8. But to your point about Palpatine and Palpatine Colossus or whatever build you're playing, 30 or 35, when you're looking at Kylo Data Vault, right? He could just be such a big unit to have to deal with, and some decks just hate doing having to deal with like big leaders like that, right? Like unless you're running Rivals Fall, unless you have a similarly large unit, it could be very challenging to deal with those sorts of things. So that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I guess one of the questions is Yoda mid-range, or are we in the soft control area? It's funny to say as a blue-green villain, you know, hater on my end playing Yoda. I don't really want to be in that same category. Kyle, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would hesitate to call it soft control, but it's certainly big mid-range, right?
Yeah.
We're running multiple Bo-Katans. You know, we're running all these huge things with home ones. You know, even with the green-blue hero, you know, you still see, blue-red hero, you see crate dragons. I mean, it still seems to be an arms race to some of these bigger drop bombs unit type meta. You know, it's we're going to see if the Han 2 ECLs and some of these aggro decks can start to come in underneath.
Yeah. So speaking of those, right, let's take a look at that deck list that the Swoop Racers brought to the Netherlands. And it's not a standard deck list for Han 2 ECL. And there, to be honest, we've been talking about it. There's really hasn't been like a meta specific list. There's been a lot of variation, whether it's more space heavy, if there's a Crucible involved, all these different things. The main additions that we see here from the Swoop Racers are the Luke Skywalker pilot unit. Really haven't seen that anywhere. Crucible one in the main, and the biggest thing to me in the side is seeing this modded cohort inclusion, and to be honest, I love it. Right, we were talking about that a little bit in our Discord today, and I think it's awesome to be able to take out Grogu. I think it's awesome in mirrors. I think this card is very sharp to be able to get a nice early ambush out and potentially keep your unit alive.
It's an interesting early ambush that can also save your ECL. So like you don't have to ECL something to take out something else. You can save it for later. So it's almost a removal card in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has the core broken cards, right? The Poe, weird interaction with Han, or effective interaction, that sort of thing. The couple that stick out to me is the main board Cham. I've started to see that go away a little bit as Yodas have learned when to and when not to ramp versus a red deck that might Cham them. It's becoming a little less effective as people get smarter in their play. And if Yoda starts to go down in overall play rate as well as other kind of core ramp decks. So I start to see some more of that go to the sideboard or even out of the list, although not quite yet. And then the other one is the 3 of the heroic arc in the main. I've seen other Hans choose to only go with 1 or put it in the side. I think that's a mistake. This card is really effective in Han too, so it makes sense to have 3 main board.
Totally. And I guess one argument you could push back upon with the Cham stuff is that it's not just for Yoda, right? And we have seen in the top 8, we were just talking about a rise in that blue-green villain. And especially like we talk about like the Palpatine ruler, right? The Palpatine leader, they're not playing units. Like they're always going to be ramping. So like their alternatives to playing around Cham probably consist of like just not doing anything, right? So it's interesting, and that's one thing that I want to talk about after we break it down the data as we get ready for sectors and stuff. Like something that I've been thinking about in terms of how Yoda is, when you're playing, is different than playing those long control matchups, and the judgments you have to make based on the length of those matches is it's an interesting topic. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, I think the heroic arcs are really awesome. Crucible I've really liked. I've been waffling back and forth when I play this deck between having 2 in the main or in the side, bringing it in for a little bit more grindy matchups. And then we also see the old faithful Darksaber accompanied by a pretty spicy clone.
That's my favorite card of this one.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because you can cheat it out with Han, and then the unit doesn't take damage, right? And then
that's
also,
so weird.
On top of that, like there's so many huge units, there's so many things going on right now in this meta, Bo-Katan, etc., that clone just comes in handy, right?
Yeah, that's a cool inclusion. Like, it doesn't really not take any. I haven't actually looked at the interaction.
I would imagine so, right? Because it's just like being played. The clone comes in as
I think because the unit it still takes damage. But either way, you still get to copy their idea or whatever. Whatever their biggest unit is becomes your biggest unit. In most
I thought
cases,
it might work
outside
like
of the triangles.
Poe, in terms of,
I think because it's not an upgrade where Poe becomes an upgrade,
That's
which
fair.
loses his. I think it still takes damage, but that doesn't make it less cool.
It's a wonky ruling either way.
Yeah, it's still really cool.
And then I also, the Luke, like I said, I think is really cool. You could pilot some stuff up, you could change some of the math, and at the end of the day, like having 3 power on the ground is really good. That's what you're looking for, right? In a lot of situations. So again, kudos to these guys. Great stuff overall. As we look
real quick, one thing the Luke inclusion also there. I want to point out that it's almost Nemec-like in that it's really good into the hard control or anybody who's trying to control your board state, because you can add damage to a unit that you may have played in space, and then you get it. If they kill it, you get another unit back. It's similar to Karis, where when he dies, he creates another unit.
And you also
there seems to be a lot of that redundancy.
The A-wings in the side too, right? Where clearly there's some matchups where they just want to go space really hard, and that makes sense, right? Okay, so kudos to those guys. Obviously, great finish, top in the event, and then top 8. So let's go over to the meta at large and talk about a little bit of the data outside of all of these cool different decks. And as we start to talk about it, Kyle, this is Secrets of Power overall. This is planetary qualifiers for this week. And then as we talk about this tournament specifically, we see Han2 ECL, or Han2 overall, represented as the biggest leader with almost 15%. Yoda shortly after, 63 at 13%. Piet, which had a pretty poor converting week, we'll talk about that a little bit as well, 9%. We break it down to leaders and bases. We see Yoda, Yoda Data Vault, the single most popular pairing, followed by Piet and then Han. Were you surprised to not see Han be the most represented, or do you think it really needed this performance this week to kind of unseat Yoda?
Yeah, I think it was on its way up, right? And as we see the amount of victory or the how well it did, then we're seeing that kind of turnover from Yoda to Han. And I think as people evaluate this data and start to look at it, that's when you start to go, okay, well, how do I combat that? And we're going to get into it, but the answer is, or appears to be, the rise of Tarkin Town decks. And there's a bevy of them. There's multiple that did well this week. And Tarkin Town in general is a good way to try to attack Han too. So we'll see if we can continue to see that circular motion, right? And see a rise up from underneath. But the big three remain the big three, right? And that's really Yoda, Han, and Piet. I guess one thing I would note about Piet is that, there's been a bit of a joke, is like Piet is a good deck to play to get your 15 points, but it doesn't win. Yeah. Piet got a win, so I guess we can't make that joke anymore because it actually did pull off a victory this week, right?
Mm-hmm. Pulling a victory off and getting it rounded down because of the percentage, I think, is still there.
That's still fair? Okay.
One thing we've been talking about pretty much since the Christmas holiday, going back maybe a week or so before, is that Han is really rising up, right? And as you try to see what these trends do, you have to make some almost like market predicting choices to try to see what those things are. We saw that kind of play out this weekend with the rise of 2 decks in particular outside of Han2 ECL, like we mentioned. And one of those here is Sabe, and this is the Sabe build from the Netherlands sector qualifier. They came in 11th place, I believe. Yeah, 11th right here it says. And this is a deck that I've been playing a lot the past day. It seems really fun, really fast, a lot of really cool interaction. I do wonder if this is the type of deck that is best suited to fight against Han2 ECL. Spoiler alert, Sharky's probably going to say it's CAD, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But
I think both have a lot of merit.
Yeah, it is cool how Kyle mentioned there is a lot of different options, right? Like there's Old Faithful Quinlan, there's this. You could even make an argument for Padme if you wanted to, right? And it's a new day, and there's also some spicy stuff we'll talk about after we get done with the sectors, like a Bosk Tarkin Town popped on the scene as well. But I think this deck is really cool because it goes into a heavy 1-drop mode. Basically, the only 2-drop you're playing is Leia, and that's effectively a 1-drop with her ability. You see some pilots, you see some tempo. This is the deck as it would have performed over the weekend. I made some changes we could talk about as well. But Kyle, when you look at this, like, what's your main takeaway? Obviously, you've played some Sabe Yellow on midday matchups. I think you're always looking at, cunning Tarkin Town decks and going back and seeing what's possible. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Tarkin Town in general, just because I like that early advantage to ping and try to get control of the board early, and then let's play from there. This deck in particular does a couple of things that I like. Try to press the advantage with the Sanctioner Shuttle. I think that the Hauler right now is well positioned into a number of decks. That 5 health is just hard to deal with.
The Hauler's big right now.
Yeah, especially against like some of these Han2 ECL decks, right? You can't ECL in Sabine's Masterpiece on turn 2 because you're not going to have all the aspects you need. Blue Leader can't kill it, right? So, sometimes it can be a bit of a burden to play that card, but I think it's well positioned into the current meta. It's just being a difficult unit to remove, and that's why you're going to see it in more and more lists. But all in all, Sabine Tarkin Town, I'm going to rebuild it. I had actually built Quinlan Tarkin Town recently. I'd been playing with that. I almost shifted to it for our PQ. Maybe I wish I had. But, this Sabine Tarkin Town is definitely something I'm going to put more work into.
Yeah. I played about 30 games today as I neglected doing work in the afternoon and had a really good time. There are some different lists going around. We'll pull up Bobby Sapphire's here from his performance at a New Hampshire PQ over the weekend. Some people aren't playing Faith in their friends because they think it's challenging, I think, to pull it off. I haven't experienced
they have no
that.
friends.
Yeah, no faith. But it's obviously more challenging than it would be in Sabe Yellow. I've been a big Sabe fan since going back for like a couple months now. We have a video up on the channel if you're interested on Sabe Yellow. I still think Sabe Yellow is really well positioned, and honestly, is probably a better deck for my general enthusiasm levels. But the allure of Tarkin Town is drawing me in, I'll be honest, based on some of the Han2 ECL stuff and otherwise. I guess like the one concern I would have with this build, if we do assume that we'll see more CAD Tarkin Town and more Tarkin Town in general, is that I don't think like this deck is going to struggle into CAD, I think, especially CAD weenies, and that seems to be the dominant variant right now. Sharkey, doesn't this kind of just seem like a deck that's going to fold the typical CAD stuff?
I would generally say yes. Now, obviously, there's player skill involved, but if I'm taking a deck between the two of them, I'm taking CAD Tarkin Town every time. Both variants, honestly. I don't think that Sabe is a particularly good leader in the Tarkin Town versus Tarkin Town kind of fight. Now, in the Tarkin Town versus Han 2 ECL, Sabe is just fine.
Yeah.
But if Tarkin's Town starts going up, I think Sabe Yellow becomes really the default's the wrong word, just the best variant to fight into a meta that includes Han and more Tarkin Town, because I do think Cunning is a hell of a card. And I think also at that point, you're going to want to get wide enough that Tarkin Town doesn't end up ruining your first turn. So Faith in Your Friends becomes even more important. And I think between the two of the Sabe builds, Yellow might be on the rise next, actually, between all of that. But I do think Quinlan also might be interested. There's a couple. I was looking to see if there's at least one that made day 2 for Tilburg. I just think that if you're going to run this shell, why not Quinlan? Like Kyle kind of asked earlier.
Well, this is more of an analog to probably Han for Tarkin Town, right?
That's fair.
As we look at these sorts of cards, I think it's missing some of those core elements of Quinlan. Won't lie, as I was looking at this build, I could pull up some of the changes that I made here. And like for instance, I added Light Maker to the side.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I've made any changes main yet, but I did want to have Light Maker. I swapped that for Outmaneuver. Some other people like Bobby Sapphire over here. He's playing Ebenhawk or Ebenhawk. I'm not sure how that's pronounced as well.
I'm a little surprised to see that wasn't in the other one, because Ebenhawk's really strong.
Yeah, I guess the issue is that it's kind of vulnerable to like the pilot or any sort of Falcon, as well as Blue Leader and stuff like that. So
Anakin, the 3-bot health is easier to remove. There's a number of different ways. I will say, Jordan, you and I had the pleasure of doing some casting this weekend. So I guess shout out to Rebel Trader, Late Night Gaming, Blue Milk Gaming, but it was the Illinois PQ. And the reason I bring it up here is we had a double yellow Sabe on stream a couple of times.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun to watch. It was a lot of fun to cast. If you want to see some really high level Sabe double yellow play, I would go watch that VOD if you have an opportunity to. There was some pretty spicy stuff. I will say, go find the moment when the Sabe Yellow player played impropriety amongst thieves to win a match, because that was
that
with
an intense judge call. There was a situation where like the player Nathan, I believe was his name, who played it, had a misunderstanding of what the cards were, is what our report was from people on the ground, and man, it was a good call. So
that card's awesome.
And also, like, that list was really similar outside of impropriety to like the list that Farm Boy was running a couple weeks ago that we made the video about on our channel. Some changes like adding the 1-drops in, like the A-wings. I think there was also the N1s added. No, the N1s were in the original. I'll have to check it out. There was maybe Mining Guild or another 1-drop there that I wasn't running before, but really interesting deck. And I think, I've been high on Sabe and her ability, I think, since release, and I think people are starting to come around to the impact you could have on making your opponent think they're drawing poorly.
Yeah, tilt them.
Yeah. Well, and we saw it really effective, in fact, in that top 8 matchup. I think they were playing against a Kira Data Vault. You could see at one point during one of the games, the Kira player has a really poor hand. And a lot of that came to the fact that a lot of these bombs that he was looking for later towards the game, if you watch the early turns, kept getting ripped by Sabe, right? So that Sabe ability was really, really working, right? Taking away some of these things that the Kira player was going to need later. And then the Kira's top deck and resupply and, kind of junk there for a little while. And some of that comes from just not having the cards in hand that would have been there from previous turns.
Yeah.
100%. I think Sabe in general is a really cool and effective leader right now. And, it'll be interesting to see if my hunch is correct that yellow may be the right call in the potential forthcoming Tarkin Town meta, but I still think the Tarkin Town one is still obviously strong and performing. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to say it's not good either.
And there's always some lag involved, right? Like we started talking about the Hantu ECL stuff. Like we said, I was on the East Coast at my parents' house. We were talking about that fear that Rise and how to have Yoda tech for that sort of stuff for weeks. And as you look at how the Tarkin Town meta is going to adjust, we have sectors coming up this week. If you don't have a history playing this style of deck, it could be a challenge to understand, like if you're ready to do it, right? For instance, like I grinded so much Sabe prior to the Christmas holiday that I'm ready to pick up Tarkin Town based on also playing a ton of Quinlan in the past and in general liking that sort
transferable
of stuff.
Skills, I believe.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to kind of be able to either pick your lane of saying, no matter what, I'm going to be a one trick and I'm playing that deck. And I'm not saying one trick from like a bad perspective, just being of somebody that wants to play one deck. Exactly. And then someone else who has the ability to, devote time to different areas. It's a different skill set entirely, but it takes some time overall. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks. Maybe the holiday makes things lag a little bit slower. Maybe the sector raises that intensity to go through. But in general, here are the matchup spread as we look at the different decks from sectors over the weekend. Excuse me, this wasn't sectors. This is overall. This is sectors. And here's the matchup. So we see Hantu, we see Yoda really having a bad spread into these top 3 decks. Obviously, it's just one event, but the 3 most represented decks outside of Yoda lost to in terms of Hantu ECL, Admiral Piet, and Han Solo 1 green. This is the Han 1 green is really surprising to me. We'll talk about that a little bit, but overall, Kyle, like it is kind of becoming a challenge to say I feel good about playing Yoda into all these decks, isn't it?
Well, 2 things happen, right? Well, one, there could be a lot of players picking up Yoda for the first time and are just not as comfortable with it at like a woo level of competition, right? Or even below that, some of these people who can really pilot that deck well. But the second part is when you become the top dog, when you become the targeted deck, that means other people are preparing for it. I know I played a lot of Yoda matches with my Han Blue, knowing or expecting to play against that deck. So I might have some tech for it, but I certainly have a lot more practice into it than would have been the case 2 or 3 weeks ago when this deck was first starting to take over the scene. So, you start to answer the question, can it hold the spot as the top dog between people targeting it with certain decks like Han ECL or continuing to play the decks that they are playing, but just getting better against it, either via tech choices or repetition, learning how to beat that deck?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting data grouping here to look at. Are we on? Is this day 2 or just all?
This is overall. We can go to
day
2.
So it's interesting because again, like you pointed out, the top 3 represented ones there has a bit of a negative win rate into. I do think that some of that is, like Kyle said, like this is now the top dog. It's now being targeted, and you can see the original deck that Yoda was built to target in Anakin, and that Yoda still has a 2-to-1 advantage over it. So it's already still got the advantage over the deck it was built to beat. And now there's other decks coming along that are built to beat Yoda. So you're going to see Han 2, and both Han 2 decks that you can see in the top bunch there, Yoda has a really rough record into.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that shift beginning. Now, where that shift ends up is going to be a little tough to tell because, like we were just talking about, Tarkin Town decks might be well positioned into a Han 2 dominated meta. But then does that mean Yoda just stays where they are? Because the top 2 Tarkin Town decks right there, Yoda's already got pretty green into.
So we were going to wait a little bit to talk about PQ stuff. But I think as we're diving into Yoda, it kind of just makes sense now. So over the weekend, I played Yoda at RPQ. Kyle, you played Han2 Blue. Sharkey, you played CAD Green. I ended up at 3, 1, and 2. It was a 6-round event, lovely event down in Puebla. My expectations were super exceeded in terms of the attendance and the event overall, and the store. It was great. But it's been weird for me because I lost one game. I played 4 Yoda mirrors. I won 2 and tied 2. So it's just been a weird experience from the perspective of trying to figure out what deck I want to play in Mesa. And then the week prior to that, I had the PQ in Branson, which like we spoke about here last week and the week prior, and I thought that I played fine and had my chances and my opportunities. And again, I went to time twice there, played 2 Han2 ECLs in the first 3 rounds. I had a little worse matchup luck. In this PQ over the weekend, I had basically a win and in to get one of our teammates, actually Zach, who ended up being a finalist on Han2 ECL. We played in the 5th round. If I win, I just have to basically, I think, win or tied, but I think mostly just win to get in. So
win.
It was, but there was no other basically Yoda decks that I would be playing, so not a 5th mirror, which would be good. But either way, my point in saying all this is that it's a really weird situation for me, at least, to like go into an event, lose 1 match, and not be in the top 8 or something along those lines. And it gets to this point where if you're playing Yoda at good competition or whatever, I like to think that I'm, fine with it and skilled with it. It's challenging because the decks that you're like 50-50 into and have good matchups into are like super grindy and are probably going to take more than 55 minutes. And then the other ones are just targeting you so hard, Piet, Han2 ECL, etc., that it makes like the overall route that you need to take throughout the event a little bit challenging. Obviously not impossible. We see it that last weekend, we see it overall, but I think it's just like an interesting conversation point as you're trying to like set a process that you think is going to be good. You have to understand if you have like the right goals in mind, if like your processes and your goals line up for how you're going to do things. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting kind of experience with Yoda specifically.
It seems like there's a lot of guessing based on very little actual data that you can glean. You know what I mean? Because like a lot of your draws, they basically have all been mirrors, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Well, I had one draw. I had one go to time versus Phenom from LXO, and he was on
right,
CAD
and that wasn't that was the non-mirror. Okay, yeah. So you're now just gonna have to go look at the data. Like, okay, how much do I expect to get that many matchups into decks that are trying to do the same thing as me? And I think that is a spot. To be in that spot is part of the reason I don't like being on the targeted deck in general.
Sure.
That is not a comfortable place for me to be. And so you're right. It is an interesting thing that you're going to have to evaluate this week while you go through your own process and repetitions of, do I want to do this or do I want to switch it up and go aggro, or do I want to switch up and go, the other direction? So it's got some interesting branching trees that I have no idea what the right answer is. And I will admit to being very much happy to be in a spot where I don't have to make that decision because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you also need to consider your own rate of play compared to your opponent's rate of play. With having 4 draws across 2 PQs, for me personally, would be unacceptable. And, some of that I might look at and go, this was not my fault, right? I play super fast. I don't know. I'm not sitting there watching every one of your games. But, to your overall point, this is why when I picked up Yoda, I came off of at Beatle with Ray Data Vault, and a natural transition, at least in my mind, was Yoda Data Vault. Let's go there. But as I practiced the matchup and I played it more, I realized I'm going to be running into these situations, and I can't stand it. Going to time is like it'll put me on tilt. I cannot handle it, right? So to me, that eliminates that deck. So that's why I ended up going with Han Blue. It was a comfort zone, and what I really tried to do was target Han 2 ECL and Yoda Data Vault. So I practiced those 2 matchups over and over and over leading up to this PQ. I teched my deck for both of them. I made sure I knew exactly how I wanted to do it. Well, it went full-on Colorado meta. So it's interesting. Yeah. You played 3 Yoda Data Vaults, and Yoda Data Vault was the most represented deck at our PQ, followed by Han2 ECL. So I picked the right decks to target. I didn't play a single one of them, right? Yeah. That's just how that goes. Right.
Oh, no.
And so, I guess a quote comes to mind. I think it was Nelson Mandela. He says, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And for me, this PQ was a learning opportunity, right? I think my process was okay. I didn't have a problem with my deck. Han2 Blue was actually the 5th deck according to top 8 conversions this week. So it was a viable deck to play. But I did learn, in some matchups, I had an Anakin Colossus matchup where I made a play mistake that definitely cost me the match, right? I won't make that mistake again. But I also learned that, perhaps just trying to target the top of the meta is not always the way to go, right? Because I made some accommodations in my deck to target those two decks specifically that hurt me into the matchups I actually saw with control and BS pilot decks where I ended up losing. So I didn't stay as well rounded as I should have, really going after those two decks, and then I didn't play them. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and so Too Long didn't listen. I got screwed on matchup luck over the course of 2 weeks, and so did Kyle. No. But so here's the. I'm just kidding. But I think I think some of the stuff overall is it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because I like the Yoda mirror. I think it's really fun. I don't like that it lasts really long. Right. There were probably I don't know. It's hard to predict and predict the future in any way, but there probably was one Yoda match where me going to time was good for me. Right, as opposed to bad for me, right? It's hard to understand what could happen, and that's one of the challenges with understanding when to go to the next game with Yoda. To be honest, I played a lot of control in the past, and I've always felt very comfortable knowing, especially with hard control, when we need to go next to save time. With Yoda, everything's so grindy, and you have so much comeback in terms of big swings with Bo, home one, Keller, and all these things that it feels like they just go so long based on that, and you're never truly out of it. And maybe you aren't, but in the 55-minute period, you are. Right.
I mean, you're playing 5 Kellerins, 3 Bows, 2 home ones, all the. I say 5 Kellerins because home one's bringing all of them back, right? Yeah. And so it's you're running through that kind of grind, and I can see what you mean. It's really, really hard to say, well, I'm out of the game, I shouldn't win this one, when you can still find the other Bo-Katan, the other home one, the other insert millions of answers here to this grindy game.
Yeah, absolutely. But overall, I guess as we talk about Yoda in full, right? We dove into it pretty deep. Is there anything else in sectors that you guys want to chat about before we talk about RPQ, the rest of the PQs from the weekend?
No, I don't think so. I don't think sectors was too far of a deviate. I mean, it's a larger player pool, but the top 3 decks, the deck conversions, kind of what went on is very similar to what happened at the PQs, just at a smaller scale. We didn't have this sometimes totally weird European results versus US results. I think we're kind of homogenizing on very similar decks and strategies across the field.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about, I think a couple weeks ago, how Hantu ECL hadn't really made an impact out here before, and I think even now we're homogenizing to that one.
Yeah. Hey. And as we get ready to talk about our PQs, I would be remiss to not talk about our favorite sponsor, our only sponsor so far, Premier Gaming. Premier Games. We all played with their tokens this weekend. I played with the streamer set. So did Kyle. Show you guys a little bit. We helped them design this. We did our best to make them very, very vibrant. So instead of being larger,
they are so cool live.
Super vibrant, right? So they just stand out and they pop. And
just for comparison,
is that this is an option that you could go through from Premier Games. We'll pull up the website here in a second. But they stand out so bright that you could also put your own tokens underneath. The same trays that fit in the regular box fit here. You see the Colorado Cantina token that we got there pimping as well. But honestly, I had such a good time playing with the streamer tokens that I might play with them in Mesa. Even though they're meant to be on stream, I really enjoy them. I still really love the regular tokens as well. I think the regular tokens for me has everything I need, and it has the dice. It has everything that fits perfectly. That's the one downfall of the streamer token, I think. But overall, man, I've just been loving these tokens, and
they're pretty.
I got so many compliments over the weekend, which always make me feel good as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going full on streamer tokens. In fact, my normal set are now the Nerd Slayers set. So,
well, if I don't play with mine, you could. I'll play. I'll let you borrow, and also maybe I'll steal Kyle's from him as we go. I'll be dropping my dog off at his house. And next week we'll be giving a little giveaway. You could enter to win your own Colorado Cantina Crew token. So very cool as well. Go to premiergamestokens.com, premiergames.store. And we'll have the link in the description, Colorado Cantina Crew in the description and in the checkout, 10% off on the best tokens in Swoop. Okay, so we had our PQ. Let's talk about some other PQs as well as we get through this weekend. This is week 6. As we talk about sectors, we see quite a bit of similarity, except on this side. Leader in base, the most popular deck of week 6 was Admiral Piet. And although it did have its first win of the season, it really performed poorly from a conversion perspective as well as an overall perspective.
Oh yeah. It was interesting to look at the data that's like the differences in sector specific versus general populace PQs as well, in my opinion, because I think the matchup spread is a lot closer, at least for Han, that I'm trying to compare right now because we just talked about Piet, but Piet got a lot better results at the sector into certain decks than he did in the general populace, but he ended up having a better win rate because he actually topped a PQ this weekend, right? Like Kyle said that was this week.
Win, yep.
So it's kind of an interesting one seeing Piet kind of be all over the place. I don't really even know how to nail down that deck. It's almost like Boba from last set, like where we kept just dogging on him for being, why is he here? And it sort of feels like that, but obviously he can win a few times.
Well, it was first in played, but sixth in conversion, so it can still get you to the promised land. I think kind of like as you compare it to Boba Data Vault, and Boba Data Vault has changed a little bit, but it's that linear gameplay I think that we like to hate on. The very small decision tree, but can just get you if you're not prepared for it or if you're in the right matchup, that sort of thing. I think Piet also suffers a little from being in that group of top three, just people knowing how to play it better. In fact, we played it just this last week intentionally on midday matchup because I wanted more reps into it just so I would know the lines and how to beat it. And I did play a Piet at the tournament, and I 2-0'd it, and it was thanks to those reps, right? So, it's another one of those decks that as people are more prepared for it, know what's about to happen, can plan better.
It could totally run any deck over if it gets the right things. I mean, if it hits its 8 drops, if it hits its OBs, its turbo lasers, there's very few things that any deck out there can do to stop it. And that's part of why it is so alluring to play, especially on short notice, especially around the holidays. I think there's a lot of human elements that go into these games, especially around this time of year, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of big PQs this weekend, a couple different decks to talk about. We already talked about Sabe. We already talked about a few other things that have caught our eyes. But as we talk about this PQ season, the thing that stood out to me the most
this was weird
this weekend was the winner of the London PQ, Oscar Christensen, I think it's how it's pronounced, on Han 1 ECL. Haven't seen a build like this almost ever. I mean, obviously it's a lot of similar cards that we see in these green yellow hero decks, but not in the shell, not with Riken in the sideboard. I think this deck is really cool, and I played against it a lot online the past couple days, but overall, man, this is really really cool deck.
Yeah, I wonder why ECL specifically, if it gives you an edge into the Han 2 matchup. Again, I haven't really considered using ECL with Han before. Typically with Han, I'm going to try to race you and I'm going to have 5 more health versus these 25 HP bases, and that's an advantage. So am I giving up too much with ECL? Obviously, in this case, no, it worked for him, right? It appears to be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe ECL allows you to intentionally be more aggressive. One of the things that stuck out to me across this list, there was actually a top 8 Han Green 30, this winner on Han Green ECL. There was also a top 8 Han 1 Yellow. The thing that I noticed that all 3 of them included was Qui-Gon. The other 2 decks had Qui-Gon main board. This one includes Qui-Gon sideboard. And I've been trying to scratch my head and figure out, what are we targeting with that? Why is Qui-Gon starting to show up in these decks? So I'm hoping you guys have an idea, or somebody listening could tell me why Qui-Gon, because I was a little surprised to see across all 3 decks, and these are geographically different people, came to the same conclusion that I want Qui-Gon in my Han 1 deck.
One of the things that I'm noticing, and this is just an ECL comment, but I think it might also apply to Qui-Gon, is that there might be a threshold they're trying to hit with it. So one of the reasons for me, I've looked at ECL for Cad Bane specifically, partially because of Han 1 green decks anyway, and the threshold that I typically want to try to hit to be able to ambush is 6 health, specifically because of Han. What's interesting to me about this deck is this doesn't have a whole lot of 6 health ambushers even with ECL. So like, I haven't quite figured out what it's actually targeting, but I could see the Qui-Gon inclusion as Han solo unit with 6 power doesn't quite get me where I want it to be, but Qui-Gon with 7 does. And so there's probably a target there somewhere. I just haven't quite nailed down what it is yet.
Well, one of the reasons is that it could pop 2 things, right? It could ambush, kill something, and then also bring something to the top or bottom of someone's deck. I also think overall that it lines up pretty well with Keller and Beck, who is seeing a lot of play in the meta right now. Lines up really well with Luke Skywalker, seeing a lot of play in the meta right now. Yoda needs a big ambush, whether it's seven's not going to do it, but it gets closer. So I think having those sorts of units also survives an ambush into Yoda, which is
I would say he has
nice.
an extra health.
Yeah, so then next turn it could kill Yoda and then pop something else as well. One thing that stood out to me is this rogue operative. And I think that combined with Blue Leader really gives some flexibility to get around the Sentinels that both Hantu ECL occasionally runs and Yoda is always running.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you have the option with Blue Leader to take out Typho. You have the option with Blue Leader to take out Obi-Wan. You have the option with Rogue Operative to take out Village Protector. And you have a couple different ways to do it. Also, remember, you're probably going to be at resource parity with Yoda, or you're going to be one ahead in the early portion of the game, at least, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And the one that actually stood out to me as causing some not confusion or questions is the Jar Jar main. I think it is really cool. I think it does give you a backup to not have to play a 7 on your flip turn, but more seriously, it's the Riken. I'm not really sure what that's doing in the side.
Well, Riken has been used in the past as a great ECL target. Like, that's one of the other reasons that you run ECLs, that he comes in and you can give himself Sentinel.
That's true.
And then on attack, he gives himself an experience token. So that's one of those who actually hits the 6 threshold that I was talking about. But that's a 1 of here. So I would have probably expected a couple more of those, I guess.
I guess if they're one resource ahead, that can kill Han Leader.
Also true, yeah.
Right.
And he's a big Sentinel at that point.
Yeah. And that could be a situation in which maybe they're trying to stop Han 1 from going 5, 6, 7. And you're like, oh, fine, I'll just go 6. Similar to how you would do in like Han 1 Blue with Anakin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an option.
Great deck overall. I think if I didn't have sectors this weekend, I might like play it, have some fun, and do that sort of thing.
Too many
but
decks.
Really, really cool build. Anybody else have any notes before we go to the next one?
Cool.
Nah.
I'm just gonna go random here. Here is I'm So Humble. Sharky
yeah.
wanted to talk about this one. This is Towson Red. I'm obviously a big Towson Red fan. Played it a lot in Legends of the Force. Think we've talked about over at our past episodes that we think Towson's might be the leader of the year next year in terms of post rotation. Couple cool additions here, Sharky. Which one is top of mind to you?
Yeah, Towson, this has got some really cool ones. So first one is I love emergency powers in this deck. It can be real pain. The other one of my favorite cards is No Disintegrations, and it's cool to see a deck actually run that. And then the third one that really caught my eye before just a second ago was Mirage. That's a really cool play too, because you can just add some damage, and then if you still have, like, Towson can then take care of another unit. So something up to 5 health is not safe on Towson's flip turn, just from extraneous damage that you can get from without even attacking. So those are the 3 cards that stood out to me at the time. Although I also thought Chaos of War is an interesting inclusion on the side.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. He probably played too many control mirrors with his team.
Yeah, probably.
He's on Enigma too, I believe, right?
But it's really cool. I love the idea.
Yeah, Kyle, what's up with you in this deck?
Yeah, I mean, this looks like pretty standard Towson to me. I kind of look at Towson as an opening towards, we were talking about how are we going to target the Han 2 decks of the world, Tarkin Town being the first answer, but this is also a good way to do it. There's a lot of ways to shrink and kill things in this deck, right? You've got Ambush, you got the Assassins, you got Anakin, you got No Disintegration. So you have a lot of ways to try to pick off all these little swarms of units while building your board at the same time. So if we do start heading towards a Tarkin Town meta, then perhaps Towson is a good entrant into that meta.
Yeah, I guess, Towson's been playing No Disintegration since the end of the last set. Emergency Power is definitely really interesting, as well as seeing Grievous pop up. Mirage as a one-off is pretty spicy. Churret in the side makes a lot of sense. I was playing at main when Quinlan was more of a threat because that was a pretty tough matchup for Towson to handle, but really cool deck. I think as the weeks go on, as we get closer to March and past March, we're going to see more and more Towson as the weeks go by. Let's move over to our buddy Yoda Killer. We were
Congratulations,
Carlos. I got the pleasure of commentating the finals. Kyle commentated a bunch throughout the day with me as well. Congratulations, his first PQ win, first trip to the finals, I believe, as well. We were talking about it in our Discord, and really cool list. It's like, from Kyle and I's perspective, it's like a little bit of a hybrid of the CAD 1 weenie build with some a little bit of help in the space fleet. Punishing One with the IGs as well. Obviously, Miss Hunter always been a real
staple.
mainstay of that deck,
Yeah.
and you know the space unit that draws the most attention because of that card draw engine. But in this build, the stolen AT hauler really shone bright, especially in those games. We give you guys an invite to go watch those on Late Night Gaming. Some great games from Carlos.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll definitely say, Carlos put on a clinic. If you do watch the matchup, he actually takes a loss game one in his top 8 entrant for a deck list error. So has to come back from adversity to take the 2. We've already stated he won, so you know what happens. But he really puts a clinic on how to do it going into those next 2 games, how he plays it. We're speculating about his sideboard decisions because we couldn't see it. It ends up paying off for him. So, I do like this deck. You kind of mentioned it here, Jordan, yourself. Last week, Sharky, you had mentioned CAD Weenies was a good option this week. This proves that to be true. The part that I hadn't considered that was part of it was the addition of the space attack, right? Specifically the haulers. We talked about it with Han, but I think the haulers are very well positioned. It is an underworld unit. It does add a different dimension of aggressiveness to this deck that is particularly well positioned into some of what you're playing against these days.
There's a lot of that. The other part about the hauler, especially with this deck, is that you have plenty of ways to just get it back. Like, yeah, they can take it from you, and I think the only thing I really wouldn't try to play it against too often, or I'd be a little more hesitant to, is against like blue-green villain, but it has uses in pretty close to every matchup that you can run into right now, and I think Carlos showed that it can be super effective.
The 5 HP is really challenging to deal with. There's only a few cards that you could combo to do that in one attack for a lot of these builds out there right now. So really great stuff.
Oh yeah, it's another avenue of attack too. Like it's a 4 power unit while you're also getting hit on the ground by a bunch of little things that you're like, okay, I have to pick an arena here.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And just seeing one CAD unit might be a little bit surprising to some of the CAD faithful. It came in clutch when you got a chance to play it. I wouldn't be surprised if that climbs up to 2 after how clutch it actually was, because there was a situation that he basically had no other outs to win or survive, in my estimations at least, without that. So we'll see how those changes get updated. You can follow Carlos over at the Hyperspace Cube YouTube channel. I'm sure he'll be posting updates and
Great run, Carlos.
showing off. Oh, that cool mat. Look at this. Yeah, so good stuff, Carlos. Shout out to you guys. Next list is from our buddy Ray Tan, another CAD list. He went out to Sector, so Sharky, please wax poetic.
Well, I just want to talk about, this is showing that another CAD Tarkin Town can still work as well. This is very much a mid-range build. This is almost what I would consider a standard mid-range build at this point. Ray's kind of a wizard, and he makes everything work because he's got a million cards in his main deck. But there isn't a whole lot of surprising card choices here. I think, anybody who's looked at a CAD mid-range deck has seen every one of these card choices. Now, again, the configuration of having 53 or 54 main deck cards is probably a little higher 54 than most people would do. But I've run 52 very comfortably. This one has enough card draw in it that actually 53 or 54 isn't that bad in terms of changing your stats. But I just want to give a shout out to him doing, was it 24th, I think, overall in the sector qualifier as well, with a very, very different CAD Tarkin Town build.
Yeah, to be fair, he crossed the pond to play it, so I think that means you're allowed to go up to 54 if he does that, right? If he comes back here, he has to bring it back down.
He has to bring it back down, yeah.
Do they have stroop waffles in the Netherlands, or is that Holland? I think that's Holland. I think it's Holland. Someone let us know in the comments.
Delicious.
Nice.
I'm 80% sure that you're talking about the same place.
Is it? Is Holland the Netherlands? Are people Dutch in the Netherlands? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I'm not sure. It's confusing. This isn't a geography
you're gonna get some
podcast.
Comments. That's what you're gonna get.
Hey, this is comment bait. You guys didn't know. All right. So these are. There's actually one more deck that we wanted to talk about. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, it's Bosk Tarkin Town. So it's a Tarkin Town world data vault. Eat your heart out, right? The annual check-in on data vault probably down to 36 or 37.
Down to.
I played this a couple times online today as well.
I love this deck.
Pretty fun. You got the Dengar hijinks, some new ads here in the past would probably be in the area of Darth Vader pilot, strike ship. But Sharky used to play this back in set 2. I remember we used to play some stupid.
I bring it out every other set, actually. Yeah. It's amazing how much damage a double collected ritual ward will do. It doesn't sound like a lot, but 2 extra experience tokens on any unit, and I've done it on plenty of them before, is a big buff. And this deck can get out of hand because of just random stuff like that. My only real gripe with the deck is that occasionally it does have the what do you call it? The wrong half deck syndrome, and sometimes you just don't draw what you're looking for. You draw all of the things to be enabled or to enable, but you don't really get a mix of things enabling other stuff. One of the most powerful additions to a deck like this one, I was using it with Bosk Nabat, but with Bosk Red you can do it too, is aggressive negotiations. You can draw 500,000 cards with this deck as well, and aggressive negotiations just says, I'm going to double collect on Deathmark this turn, next turn I'm going to hit you with aggressive negotiations, next turn I'm going to do it again. Good game. And it's kind of just one of those, like, that is a heck of a finisher that this deck probably needed to stay competitive.
Yeah, that was exactly the point that I was going to raise. When I first saw this deck, I thought, oh, that's cool. Just kind of going through the data, I found it, and I was like, let's talk about this. But my initial reaction was, should this just be like Turbo Kylo? Like, what am I getting out of Bosk that replaces me wanting to play Kylo? And that's exactly the answer right there. I realized after looking at the list is, I can stack my hand and aggressive negotiations you for $1 million, right? That's what I'm going to try to do to close this game out. And so, I thought that was cool. I haven't built this deck yet, but as I kind of look at the, what are we going to play on midday matchup? This is definitely one I wrote down because it looks like fun.
Well, it's almost similar to what the concept of Dedra Tarkin Town could have been. Right. Yeah. But Bosk just has a little bit more of a intense card draw engine as opposed to a gradual card draw engine. Right. Like you could draw 4 in one turn as opposed to giving someone the option 4 turns in a row. Right. Not to say either are bad, but it's I think that that wrong half of the deck syndrome really resonates with me as someone who used to play Bosk Blue a lot. Right. You either get them or you don't. I think in Bosk Green, especially the data vault Bosk Greens that were going around, was an even bigger problem because you had to ramp into the stuff you had to play. Sometimes you would just not have the stuff to play. But I think it's a good segue here to talk about how we're prepping for sectors because there is so much Tarkin Town going around, whether it's going to increase or decrease. This is a good place to end as we look forward to what's coming up in the future. Sharkey, you played CAD Green last week. Are you going to be part of the Tarkin Town resurgence in Mesa next week?
It is going to be an awfully tough thing to resist if I do. I have a Tarkin Town CAD build that's similar to Ray's that I put together again today. I basically just took a couple ideas he had and threw them back into my normal build. But it's really high on my consideration list. That being said, I don't think green was the wrong choice last week. I don't think I got done in by deck choices. I can talk about what I think I did get done in by.
Sure.
But I think the deck choice either way of CAD Green or Tarkin Town was the right one. And I think with the Tarkin Town, prevalence is the wrong word, but the strength of Tarkin Town into Han is making me heavily consider either one drop or mid-range, similar to what our two friends ran this weekend.
Kyle, any thoughts?
Yeah. If I were going, maybe I will. We'll see.
When you show up on Friday,
Saturday morning. If I were going to go, I would be comfortable with Han 2 Blue again. But the rise up in Tarkin Town and Palpatine is we did see 2 Palpatine wins. RPQ was one of them. I don't want to be playing Palpatine Yellow with Han 2 Blue, admittedly. And Tarkin Town is a challenge for all Han 2 decks, and Blue is included with that. So I probably would swerve. Now, our friend Alex, I'm sure, would disagree. He's hardcore at Han 2 Blue, and I'm sure we'll stay with it. And it did have results, right? I mean, there were conversions, so it's not a bad choice. I personally would probably steer a little bit away from it. I'd start looking at the Han 1 green stuff, give it one last ride before rotation. That's probably where I would edge to. And it's my initial thought process towards Milwaukee when we head out there. So it is a deck I'm starting to look at a little bit more. I've got a little more time than you guys do, though.
Yeah. Isn't Alex to Han 2 Blue basically me to Cad Bane?
Sure. That'd be fair to say. But I think part of the issue, or not the issue, the concept that we're trying to solve, right? The problem we're trying to solve is that a couple weeks ago, one of the things that I was thinking about going into the Branson PQ was that I felt that Han 2 Blue was better situated between Han 2 ECL and Yoda. That you had the ability to kind of have a 50-50 matchup with both of them. I think it's probably into Han 2 ECL, I think globally, including all levels of skill, I would say it's probably a little less than 50-50 for Han 2 Blue. Would you agree with that, Kyle?
I would agree with that. Slightly under. I mean, I'll take my chances. I feel comfortable in that
Sure.
matchup. But you're right. I think probably slightly unfavored. I think watching some of Alex's games, that's been the result as well.
Yeah, with Yoda, it probably is a true 50-50. Maybe a little bit of an edge towards Yoda, but really not much, I don't think.
Yeah, I probably would stick the edge towards Han Blue, given reps. That might just be a disagreement thing or a player.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about everybody, like the experience that anyone could expect. Yeah, I think it's closer than it is on the other side with the edge that Han 2 ECL has over Han 2 Blue. Could we find that common ground?
Yep, agree.
So I think as that happens, it's almost a similar predicament than the Yoda player might be in, me, etc., someone else, is that now not only are you in a 50-50 in Yoda, slightly less than a 50-50 in Han 2 ECL. If CAD pops up, that's not going to be a 50-50.
Yoda should have a good one on that one.
Well, Yoda's going to be good into CAD. I mean,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, I'm talking about more CAD into the Han variants, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And now it's the question of do the Han variants stay on top in a way that Tarkin Town can affect them, and then all of a sudden Yoda has a sigh of relief being able to be at a different point in the targeted triangle, or is that too risky of a proposition?
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shark. Yeah.
I was say, yeah.
Sharky, go.
It's just a little lag there. The problem I see with that is that I don't think you target all of the Tarkin Town decks the same, and that there is enough variety among them that it might be risky to me to gamble on it being something that you can just stay put on, I guess is what I was going to say. So, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the question I would be asking in your position. I think Yoda's still well positioned. It's going to continue to get good results. Maybe it is a little more well positioned if you get some of those juicy matchups against some of these Tarkin Town decks you feel favored into. I would still be questioning do I want to risk double draws? Do I want to risk drawing multiple times in a tournament again? We talked about it earlier, but for me, I think I'd be off put by that. If you feel comfortable powering through it, I think Yoda's still very well positioned, especially given your reps and practice with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, sectors, a tie is a lot worse than a PQ. Just like flat out, you need a certain amount of wins and a certain amount of points to get to day 2, and a tie doesn't help you in that situation. With PQs, it's a smaller field where you could potentially have 1 or 2 draws and no losses and make top 8. So it's one of those situations that I think a draw is worse in sectors. But the question is, does the meta change more in your favor to make it so those draws don't occur? And these are part of the predictions you have to make and stuff like that. And I think that my general feel is that I'm probably gonna end up going off Yoda because I don't feel like the journey towards Tarkin Town having that big of a meta share is going to be ready this week. I think the week following sectors, right, which would be like the week of the 19th, right? I think that's the week in which Yoda might be back safe again. Again, this is just a feeling that I have in terms of the overall meta. Somebody could go into sectors and win with Yoda, and I wouldn't really be surprised, right? But it is something that I think you have to take into account as you're trying to figure out what deck you want to play.
I think the other thing that you may want to think about is that even though Yoda is and now Han too, I guess, are the top 2 decks by representation, and you can throw Piet in there as well. All of those 3 combined, I think, are roughly the same percentage as Django was at his peak. So you can also run an entire tournament like I did on Saturday without running into a single Yoda. So I wouldn't go too heavy into the data to make your decision. I think comfort is a significantly larger portion here for you. And I say that just because you're looking at what's the highest? Is it 9 to 10% highest
here, right? So like Han regular, Han Solo from Shadows without a base attached is 9.8%. As we bring that down to leader and base, it goes to 7.4 for Yoda Data Vault, 6.3. So in the course of a given week, you should really expect to play one of these decks throughout your event, right?
So I think
etc.
I think that makes it so that you should be considerate of them, but I don't know if you want to necessarily make your entire decision based on the rise of Tarkin Town or the fall of whatever. I think you can have a deck you can target, which Yoda came on because of Anakin, but keep in mind the raw numbers that we're looking at here too.
I think that's a great call.
Yeah, totally makes sense. At that percentage, you're going to play, what, 9 rounds? You need 7 wins to advance, probably. If you're going to play 9 rounds and their percentage is sitting at 8%, there's a good chance you'll play 1 Yoda, right?
Yeah.
1 mirror, maybe not so bad.
Yeah, and as obviously, like, there's no woe is me happening, but playing 4 Yodas over the weekend is above expectation.
Yep, that's a lot.
Right?
It's a lot more.
Yeah.
You took all of them away from me. I didn't play a single one.
Yeah,
and I was ready for them.
I didn't play one either, and I wanted to. You know,
So like, that's just the way it is, right? And sometimes it works in your favor, and that's what it takes to win a lot of these places. It's like that intersection in which skill and luck really forms, and then all of a sudden you get an opportunity to advance. Okay, so Kyle, you mentioned that you thought that Hantu Blue was well positioned. You might be swerving. Do you think that Hantu Blue is still well positioned?
Yeah, I think the data shows that it can still win, but it might be on a slight downward trajectory because of Tarkin Town decks. Now, I've played a lot of Tarkin Town decks. In fact, I played Han 2 at Worlds, and I played 3 Tarkin Town decks, and I got all 3 of those matchups. But the data shows Tarkin Town decks should probably be favored into Han 2 Blue, some of these CADs, these sort of things in the overall data. So, if you're having a rise in potentially negative matchups for what you're playing, that's going to hurt. But if there's also a rise in some of these aggressive decks like Sabine and some of these sort of things, I feel great in those matchups. You might be able to eat up some of these aggro matchups if they start showing up. So overall, I still think it is well represented. I think for me personally, my run with Han Blue has just ended. I've kind of played it in every major event now, and I've made top 8s of PQs. I've done well, but I'm just I'm kind of burnt out on it, and so I think for me the run has come to an end. I want to make a transition, here before the end.
Got it.
I think that's actually a really good kind of segue to a point I was going to make anyway, in that you also need to play a deck that you're happy playing, that you enjoy playing, things that make you want to go to the next turn, let alone next round, let alone next game, let alone next match, right? You want to do something to make sure your mental game isn't holding you back as well. Like if you're playing a deck that you despise, despite no matter how good it is, that I've harped on this before, but like this kind of preparation is at least half mental. You got to take care of yourself both during the day and on the lead up to it. And I think the deck choice is part of doing that as well.
Yeah, and the only way to find out what you like and don't like is to try it, right? So it's like the 3 of us all have different and similar tastes, right? Like I think if anything, Kyle and I probably tend to have a little bit more similar of a deck interest, but on the fringes of the things that I like, Kyle hates. On some of the things that Kyle like, I hate, right? Like for me, I love the Yoda matchup. I find it really, really like, mentally stimulating. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. You get to draw a bunch of cards. You play a bunch of cool, pretty prestige units, blah, blah, blah. But it takes too long, right? So like that's the thing for me. I guess, Kyle, one thing that I would say, going back to Han 2 Blue, is that I do think that if some of these aggro decks are really tilting towards space, it could be a little bit of a long day for Han 2 Blue, depending on the situations. Obviously, at Worlds and otherwise, we can't forget that that force throw is still a thing. Throwing that crate drag, and I missed that. F in the chat for everybody who misses that as well. But I think that's something to think about as these pilot decks become more popular, as these space decks become more popular. All the Sabe variants they're balanced, but they tend to lean towards space overall.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I mean, you're hitting right on one of the mistakes I believe I made this past weekend in really trying to tilt my matchups in favor of beating Yoda and Han. I constructed my sideboard in such a way that really ignored some of these space aggro decks. Removing Bombing Run, removing Let's Call It War, these sorts of things that really helps me there. And then, of course, I ran into some of this space BS stuff, right? And so I didn't have the tools I would have normally had to beat that sort of thing. You got to keep in mind that stuff exists. Maybe don't slant your sideboards like I did, so hard towards specific matchups.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And remember, you can only bring in so many cards, right? Like, especially when you're loading up your sideboard to bring in like 8 cards into one matchup. You have to, like, in those cases, I force myself to sit down and be like, these are the exact cards that I'm taking out and why. And I battle with myself. And then I realize it probably shouldn't be 8 cards. It's never 8 cards. Okay. So Sharky, you kind of mentioned that you're going to be leaning towards a CAD variant, whether it's green or Tarkin Town. What's going to be like the deciding factor for you there?
I'm going to touch back on mental health a little bit ago, actually. And it sounds weird that I'm going to take a color choice based on that, but it's one of those things I've been struggling with a little lately. And it's one of those, like, whatever I'm feeling comfortable with the most. I don't need to go into something already putting myself at a disadvantage if I'm not, or if I'm questioning the decision I made, right? And it's a gut feeling in this case, and I think it's going to end up being which one am I having most fun with on Thursday that I choose. If I'm being strictly honest, it'll be what am I enjoying playing, and that doesn't always necessarily mean what am I winning against everything with, because sometimes the data, local data can skew overall trends, and you can lose 4 in a row with a deck that, you know, you enjoy, but you're worried about actually being effective, and it may just end up being effective anyway. Like, it might just be the same thing. There might be some external factor causing that small losing streak to then affect your deck choice, to then affect your mental game, to affect basically something that you shouldn't really let affect the rest of the weekend for you. And so it's going to come down to comfort probably Thursday night. I will lock in to myself by Thursday so that I'm not questioning myself on the trip, but I have a feeling I'll know what I'm playing by then.
Yep. So for me, maybe I'll be strictly honest. Maybe I won't. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments and stuff like that. But I'm between like some probably mix of like 3 decks, give or take. Like I said, I am leaning towards getting off Yoda, but again, I have so many reps with it recently, and I feel like I'm doing okay with it that I might pick it up if comfortability. If comfort overall is the thing, Yoda would be my choice. And probably if I had a second choice in the comfort area, it probably would be Han 1 green, with just how much I've played of it in the past, and that I feel like I could just do things that I want to do and not necessarily worry about some of the other things. But I've been really enjoying either one of these Sabe builds, either double yellow or Tarkin Town. I've been really high on that. Last week and the week prior, I really gave it the old college try to convince myself that I liked Han 2 ECL. And like, to be fair, like I usually, there's very few decks that I play and like don't like. Blue-green villain outside of Thrawn has always been one for me that hasn't necessarily been my favorite thing. And Han 2 ECL, for whatever reason, just hasn't clicked with me, right? And I typically don't have a problem playing the most popular deck. But when I'm playing the most popular deck, it's because I like it too. It's not because it's the most popular deck. And I don't necessarily feel comfortable being in the targeted position when I'm not feeling as comfy as I need to be, right? So Han 2 ECL is pretty much off the table for me. I think I will end up playing either Yoda, a Sabe variant, or Han 1 green.
I'm personally hoping it's the Sabe variant because I think Sabe yellow would be really cool to see take off this week, just saying.
I do want to call you out just a little bit on the blue-green villain thing. When we met, you were Mr. Iden, right?
No.
Yeah, that was double blue, wasn't it?
See, I'm more
double green there.
Yeah, I'll play hard control all day, baby. Blue, red, blue, yellow, blue. But until Thrawn, honestly, Thrawn was the first blue-green villain deck that I liked playing, and it was because of all, and in weird ways, Thrawn and Yoda have similarities in terms of like the search, the ability to filter, like just doing extra stuff. I think when I started playing Django, I had really come off playing Control and a lot of Sabine and stuff like that. And I realized I just like doing extra stuff. I like doing something and having it have like a rippling effect. Like for his, obviously, Django, the ping and exhaust. The Yoda, play this, play that, that sort of concept overall. But yeah, I think I'll end up being on one of those decks. I played a ton of Sabe today, Sabe Tarkin Town. I really enjoyed it. I'll be playing that a little bit more throughout the week. I probably will be waiting towards the last minute because that's the kind of guy I am. I'll have a lot of cards.
You're only bringing 5 decks with you this weekend,
right? We'll see. We'll see what's going on. We have a great Airbnb, 8 of us coming down, 6 Cantina Crew members, and then 2 late night Blue Milk Gaming guys with Alex Krez and then John Lights Out from Late Night. So we should have a great time. Hopefully I'll be locked in by Thursday as well, so we can hang out and relax and do all that good stuff. I have a feeling we're gonna get dragged into doing some content, Sharky. So Kyle will feel left out and stuff like that.
Good, leave him out.
Yeah,
at least until Saturday morning.
All right. Any notes until and about deck choice? Any other things you guys want to chat about before we go on to a little bonus segment here on the pod?
I'm ready to hear Kyle's rant, so let's do it.
So today in our Discord, which we are in the process of getting ready to welcome some of you fine individuals into, we took a team vote. You see, that's how democratic we are here at the Cantina Crew. And we got an affirmative. The yays had it, so we'll be opening it up eventually. We'll keep you guys up to date on that. But a big conversation about IDs and double losses, the semi-annual, the biannual conversation that stirs up all the time.
Bi-monthly.
Yeah, it's always something, right? But Kyle, you were feeling really passionate about it, so I'll kind of just give you the floor in terms of setting the stage and, you know, going through it all.
Yeah, so I mean, really what this came out of was we had like an abnormal amount of, we said draws. I had originally said IDs, but they weren't all IDs. We had unintentional draws. It was kind of a draw fest. It made the math really weird for who could intentionally draw and move on, that sort of thing. But really the conversation of draws exploded at RPQ in general. It was because we had a lot of Yodas, and then we had a lot of control that led to a lot of draws and long matchups. And so, you know, it kind of proliferated in our Discord as to, again, should something be done about this? And usually the conversation leads with kind of that, when you talk about a carrot versus stick approach, it's always the stick approach, right? It's the, hey, you know, we need to make it so that people don't want to draw. Is it a double loss? Do we talk about intentional draw? You get a point once, but then a second time it's a double loss, that sort of thing, kind of the negative end of that conversation. You know, what I brought up today was, well, maybe we just need to incentivize playing it out. I mean, we are here to play card games. I want everybody to play it out. I want to have a reason to play it out. So, you know, I kind of had this idea from, listening to different football podcasts, but they talk about how to incentivize teams to play through the final weeks of the NFL season. And one of the ones that had been thrown out that I'd heard before that I think would be great for SWU would be incentivize getting the number one seed. Right now, you're incentivized to make the top 8, and then it's kind of a reload. Let's see how it goes. There needs to be more of a reason to finish in the top half of that top 8. That would incentivize people to play it through. So kind of the idea was, hey, maybe if you get the 1 seed, you get to pick your matchup. It's not 1 versus 8. You know, we get our top 8. I'm the 1 seed. I can look at the other 7 players, or maybe it's the bottom half, however it works out, and I can say, I want to play against that deck, right? And so now there's a real big reason for me to get the number 1 seed, and also incentivizes me to play it out for that number 1 seed. If you still want to double draw and just say, I don't care, I want to make the top 8, you still can. You want that mental break, you want to take a couple rounds off. We're not taking that away, but we are giving the opportunity for some players to say, no, I want to play it out. I want number 1, I want to face this person. I want number 2, I want to face this deck, right? It less randomizes the top 8. It gives you an incentive to play rather than disincentivizing you not to play, right? So I don't know. I don't know if it would work. I think it would make for great content. I know if I'm sitting there watching tournaments, a lot of times you don't get to see the top table because they're drawing, right? You get to see other ones. Well, maybe more games get played out. But if we do get to a top 8 and we have this situation where Kyle's going to pick as the number 1 seed who he gets to play against, that's also part of the draw. I think it would be fun to watch. I
like that idea because of the positive incentive there, and less the route I would have taken, which is give everybody a double loss anyway. No, I like that idea because it does make the top 8 a little less random as well. Because sometimes you can see top 8s and just be like, oh man, you just got screwed by the bracket. But you can take that excuse away from somebody now too if they lose.
So I don't really have a hot take, or a strong take rather, but my opinion would be that it shouldn't be anyone. I think a winner picking the second place feels like a pretty terrible experience for the person in second place. I think the bottom half of the bracket makes a lot of sense if that was going to be the concept, like 1 through 4 gets the choice to pick 5 through 8. Place 1 picks, place 2 picks, place 3, so on and so forth. Again, I don't really care. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the reality is that people are going to complain regardless of the situation, right? And I think people like complaining. That's the thing. It is funny though that you mentioned this, because this afternoon I was listening to a basketball podcast that I listened to called The Hoop Collective. It's an ESPN podcast. And they were talking about the problem in tanking in the NBA. If you don't follow sports, tanking is teams intentionally losing either by benching players, sitting players, trading players away to get better draft picks. A couple years ago, the NBA instituted a reform in the lottery odds. It used to just be a weighted lottery with your record giving you the opportunity to get a ping pong ball that gave you the opportunity to pick 1, 2, 3, et cetera, et cetera. They changed it to flatten out the lottery odds and give chances for players and teams to jump up from 10th place to first place and so on and so forth. Had some pretty unintended consequences. The past 3 years, the Spurs have drafted in the top 5 or top 6, picked maybe the best player that came into the league since LeBron James. And now there's a big debate about, has this caused a lot of issues across the league? And then again, the other issue is that if you're if you're sitting your players in nationally televised games, you're sending a message to the audience that you shouldn't be watching these games because they don't matter. The players aren't playing. Why should you watch them, right? So the reason that I mentioned this, the reason I do this long preamble, is that one of the things they mentioned on that podcast this afternoon was a quote from Charlie Eager, I think is who they accredited it to. And it was saying, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Right. And that's the situation here where the incentives are out of line for the outcomes that I think the average player wants and understands. Right. And I think it's not necessarily a problem with how it works. It's the incentive of saying, I don't have to play. I'm guaranteed this if I start 4-0, if I start 3-0 even, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really an incentive issue. And Kyle, maybe what you're talking about changes that incentive structure a little bit. And I also think, and I've complained about this because again, humans like to complain, is that like I just think that the prizing for this game is pretty terrible. I think it's both from like institutional level and a store level. Like there's so much cool stuff you could do. A Star Wars Lego set. I don't even like Lego, but I would be happy to win that. Give me a lightsaber. Give me a trip to Galaxy's Edge. Give me a freaking mug. So just there's so much Star Wars merch. How about a box set? How about there's just so much opportunity for integration. Kyle, you're in your office right now. I don't know how much ability you have to show one of your cool swords that you got from Lord of the Rings. Could you grab that for me actually? Because I could put you on full screen. I don't know if you could tilt your camera around.
Yeah, I could totally tilt it. So
yeah,
I think what you're getting at here was, go ahead.
Show him. I'll keep talking as you show. But basically, in the old Lord of the Rings game, Kyle got the opportunity to win these actual like studio made props for Lord of the Rings. These are heavy swords. Like these are like legitimate replicas, and it adds so much flavor to the game. And with the IP of Star Wars as an advantage, in some situations it's been a disadvantage. We've talked about that at length here on the podcast, but it could be so much cooler, and I would like it to be.
Yeah, totally. We need to have more lightsaber tournaments. We need to have more, and it's happened a couple of times, but yeah, maybe you get prizing that only exists for the end of the pool
Swiss
play, right?
Yeah.
So you're still going to have top 8, but incentivize people to play it out in Swiss by giving prizes that only exist in. If you finish at the top at the end of Swiss, we're going to give you something awesome, right? Maybe some people don't care about that. They still just want to make top 8. But you're right. I was exactly getting at more incentive to actually finish in first place. And whether that's incentive going into the top 8, advantage in the top 8 beyond just initiative, or if it's incentive for just finishing the top place via prizing, I just want more incentive to play it out, right? You don't have to. We're never going to make everybody do it. Some people are always going to be cool with double draw. That's part of the game as long as we have it. Mm-hmm. But there should be incentive to say, you know what? No, I want to play it out, right? And I'd like to see more people do that. I think it's good for the game. It makes less people kind of go about it, but it's also good for streaming. It's good for us to, viewers, right? Sure. Viewership.
It's definitely better, and that's another way to look at it too. Is it's good for the streaming good for, I guess recruitment isn't the right word, but like getting to see that final match is still pretty exciting. Who's playing for the big prize, whatever, right? Like that draws more people in, draws more attention, drives more engagement.
100%. And I guess like my closing thing would be people are still gonna about whatever it is, right? Yeah, so we have to get over it. Okay, so great stuff tonight, a lot to go over. We'll catch you up after we get back from sectors. I'm really excited. I know Sharkey is too. Got midday matchup coming up this weekend, or excuse me, on Friday. Kyle mentioned that he was thinking about playing maybe Bosk Tarkin Town. You're gonna have a guest on stream as well, as Carl is staying the weekend at your house. Maybe he'll make an appearance on stream with Chewy. I'm sure they're going to be causing quite the ruckus. So what's the other deck on deck for this Friday?
Yeah, I haven't worked it out yet. I was thinking of, since I don't have another SQ for a while going way off meta, but since there is, the qualifiers that you all are heading to this weekend, I think picking some of the interesting decks that came out of the data this week makes sense. Maybe that is Bosk versus Sabine, but probably Bosk versus something, because that did look like a lot of fun. So
I thought of your wager already. Whoever wins the day gets to get on the plane and go join us in sectors the next day.
Ooh, that's a pretty heavy bet.
Speaking of incentives,
I don't know if Jillian could handle being in the Airbnb with eight schmucks like us.
I think Jillian would handle it better than Kyle would. Come on.
we'll see how it goes. So hey, if you made it this far in the podcast, geez, I don't know what's going on, but if you see us this weekend at sectors, please come say hi. We always really appreciate getting to connect with all of you. It's always a highlight of our days and our weekends. So really excited for that. We'll keep you up to date as we get back talking about our results and the results at large. And until next time, guys, I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina Crew. For Sharkey and Kyle, stay tuned, stick with us, and we'll see you next time.